This is Reporter Room with Jessica Della Davies.
Hello, Reporter Room investigators. Come on in, come on in. I'm glad that you are here with me today. Today, we're going to be talking about the Bryan Kohberger case. Yes, he had a hearing with Judge Meghan Markle today. Got some good takeaways from that. Come on in, tell me where you're from. You can tell me what country, what state, what continent, whatever you feel comfortable sharing. But today, we're going to be talking about the James Patterson, Vicky Ward, and the number one clue that we all missed. So let's go ahead and dive into this. My name is Jessica Della Davies. I'm an investigative journalist, and my job is to investigate crimes, crime scenes, and potential suspects, and share with you how to do the same thing. If you haven't subscribed, well, it's free and it helps me out a lot. I can't get to 60,000 subscribers without your help. Like, share, leave a comment, and know that everything I'm sharing with you is my opinion. This video is for educational and entertainment purposes only. So come on in and tell me where you are from. And let's go ahead and dive right in to the number one clue that we all missed. So we know from the book, I have it, but I don't have it handy, from James Patterson and Vicky Ward, that Bryan Kohberger has a history of breaking into neighbors' houses, right? We heard from the neighbor whose son was in jail, and he broke into the house. And this happened in Pennsylvania prior to him moving to Washington to attend WSU. So we've heard that there were the IDs inside a glove, inside a box, inside his parents' Pennsylvania home. So we're going to talk about the number one clue that we all missed. So this is a pattern that we often see with peeping toms and stalkers. And the pattern is that they escalate, right? They start, very small, just looking into windows, voyeur type of behavior. And then it continues to escalate, not with all, but with some. So up in this case, we do have evidence that Bryan Kohberger was escalating from the time that he was in his parents' house in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania, to the crimes of November 13th of 2022. So let's take a look at everything. So both of the IDs that were found inside the glove, inside the box, belong to women that Bryan Kohberger knew from his past. And at least one of the women worked with him at the school district. She worked for him at Pleasant Valley School District, where Bryan Kohberger was a security guard from 2016 to 2021. So this woman was never publicly identified, and the other woman, we don't know how she knew Bryan Kohberger. Now, neither one of these women were harmed or threatened by BK, but both were reportedly shocked, absolutely shocked to find out that Bryan Kohberger had their IDs inside a glove, inside a box, inside his parents' Albrightsville, Pennsylvania house. So how did he get these IDs, and what were the meaning behind this? So in criminal psychology, keeping personal items such as trophies is recognized as a form of criminal behavior. And it's we've heard from, law enforcement, they didn't know what the motive was, but I do think that we do know what the motive is. And in this keeping of these IDs of these two women would have suggested BK trying to have dominance and control over them. So the IDs inside the glove, inside the box, raises more questions. Were they trophies? Were they intimidation tools? Were they links to other crimes that Bryan Kohberger was never prosecuted for, never got caught? Remember, he broke into his neighbor's house. So BK's nocturnal pacing in prison is also part of this. So, hear me out. Combined with the unsolved sorority break-in months earlier, suggests that maybe Bryan Kohberger was rehearsing. Maybe he was refining. Maybe he was testing out law enforcement's response before acting. And this was him doing the sorority break-ins in the months leading up to these crimes. This was him escalating. So not all voyeurs, we used to call them peeping toms, we used to think that they are harmless. Not all of them escalate to the level that Bryan Kohberger did. But for the minority who do, the progression is driven by a deep-seated desire for power and control. And for these individuals, the passive act of watching through a window or maybe online eventually fails. It stops providing them with the stimulation, and I'm watching my words here, leading them to pursue more aggressive and more terrifying forms of being able to meet those needs for stimulation. Now, this escalation process can often be understood by examining the psychological needs and also the fantasies of the perpetrator. Now, we know what Brian Kohberger's proclivities were, right? We know what he liked to search according to Dateline NBC. He had searches on his phone for things that were, non-consensual, and women who were drunk and women who were passed out. So this is what he was into. So this is what he was watching, and his needs were increasing, though. That was probably failing to satisfy him. So the voyeurism and the low-level intrusion, often perpetrator is compelled to act on them in a low-risk, kind of anonymous way, which may be how Brian Kohberger ended up with these two women's IDs inside a glove, inside a box, inside his parents' old Wrightsville, Pennsylvania home. So it provides a sense of power that allows them to put a victim in their sights, in their crosshairs, and observe them without their knowledge. And we know that he tended and befriended his WSU colleague, the woman he shared an office with. He staged a break-in. He stole her key from her office drawer to her house. He went in, he moved some papers around, he put a cake in the microwave, but he also took some trophies. He took a watch and some papers, enough to, get her upset, make her feel disturbed. And when she was trying to install security systems and needed help, he came in and he installed security cameras inside her house and reportedly used these security cameras to spy on her. Now, many people, like Brian Kohberger, will also progress to breaking and entering to steal personal items, like he did with his WSU student. And again, these are him collecting trophies and mementos and exerting power and dominance over the victim. So the case of his WSU colleague was definitely about collecting mementos, but it was also about getting access to her cameras. It was also about being able to spy on her in her most intimate and private moments. But when this didn't do enough to satisfy his urges, he escalated again. And I believe that this is around the time he began showing up at the 1122 King Road home. I believe he had this house picked out, and he was trying to lure Murphy the dog into the woods. So at this point, it wasn't just about him going by the house to look in the window to stare and ogle at the girls by sitting in that back parking lot of the apartments. He wanted to interact with them. And if he could have lured one of the girls into the woods by using the dog to do it, he would have done it. So how did he get Murphy in the woods? My opinion, he just would have had to have had some kind of a treat. But they said Murphy wasn't even coming when they called him. This is what multiple people who witnessed this happen say, that Murphy normally came when he was called. He's a golden doodle. He's smart, right? So this would have been about Brian Kohberger gaining proximity to the victims. And this is the way the predator seeks more power and excitement. And so some people believe that BK was doing this to try to get to know Murphy, the dog. I don't think that was his, because he, to keep Murphy from barking. I don't think that was his purpose. I think he was intentionally luring Murphy the dog into the woods to see if he could get one of these young women to follow the dog into the woods. And it would have also, he would have seen them calling for him and not being scared to come in the woods and feeling afraid. That would have given him a lot of excitement and power and domination over these young women. So I think he was anticipating this going into the house on November 13th. I think he was trying to see if any of these young women would follow Murphy into the woods, because this was a very exciting game for Brian Kohberger. So stalking allows the offender to prepare for, now I know everybody says, oh, but Bill Thompson said that there was no stalking. Well, he says stalking now. So it was really a legal definition. So stalking allows the offender to prepare for and to anticipate, what they're going to do next by following and observing their victims from a closer range. And this behavior, while not yet violent in nature, will increase the victim's vulnerability. So it is in itself a power play that would give the perpetrator a thrill, that creepy surveillance of peeping into his WSU colleagues' cameras to watch her would have given him a thrill. That luring Murphy into the woods and watching the girls afraid to come and get the dog would have made him feel powerful. Just like making those WSU students walk around him, following them out to their cars. The University of Idaho students saying he was in their student union canteen, staring them down. That was all designed to intimidate and make them feel uncomfortable. So while simply trying to lure the women into the woods didn't probably do it for him, he actually ended up entering and making the decision to enter the 1122 King Road home. And I believe he fantasized about this. He planned this for a good long while. We know he ordered the K-bar knife in March of 2022. So trophy collection, let's talk about that. And then we're going to go to the hearing from today. But the trophy collection is the act of doing away with these young people. It would have made him feel really good initially. He would have gotten a high from it. And we get this thumbs up photo. Let me see if I have that handy, of Bryan Kohberger right after these crimes were committed, where, he clearly felt really good about himself. He was feeling, really happy and full of, vigor and verve of committing these crimes, right? So this would have been his initial feeling about this. He would have felt great initially. And this is where we got this thumbs up photo. And I think he would have fantasized about this crime, what he did to Kaylee, Maddie, Ethan, and Xana over and over. But this attack would have only temporarily satisfied his desire for dominance and control. And this euphoric feeling would have been followed by a deep depression. So we've heard, and this is one of something that I think we almost, that Bryan Kohberger disappeared during the time of Thanksgiving. He wasn't seen by anybody for a full week. And in my opinion, this was him in a depression state after the euphoria of committing the crimes. Because where was he? Was he holed up in his apartment, or was he in a hotel? Some people have said they believe he was in a hotel. So to prolong his high, remember, this guy was addicted, right? He was addicted to medication. He probably needed more and more of the H as it goes. And then with getting trophies, which early on when he was at his parents' house in Albrightsville, and working as a security guard, just stealing their IDs was enough to make him feel good. Breaking into his neighbor's house to steal made him feel really powerful and good. Showing up in the neighbor's mom's kitchen uninvited was another way of breaking in, another way to intimidate and dominate her. So we see him escalating. WSU talks about, this text message, if we hand this guy a PhD, he's going to use this to harass women. So, but where was he the week of Thanksgiving? He didn't go home. Did he check himself into a hotel, or was he just sitting in his apartment depressed? Did the low hit him? So to prolong and relive the high, these predators take these trophies from their victims. These can be jewelry, these can be papers, these can be photos, these can be IDs found inside a glove, inside a box. And this was him beginning to escalate back in Pennsylvania, in my opinion. So this trophy collecting and keeping, I think this does prove also that Bryan Kohberger did probably take trophies from these victims. And I think the knife would have been one of those big trophies. I know maybe he did throw them in the river. Maybe he did feel panicked, but I think it's more likely that he buried them somewhere. That's why he went down to the Costco and why he, went down. I think he went down there to bury those trophies. If he just wanted to throw them in a river, he could have just thrown them into the Snake River and made a U-turn and go back. He didn't do that. He had his phone off and disappeared for hours that day. And I think he went to go relive the crime. I think he buried them somewhere where he could go back and revisit it. So I do think those items are somewhere buried in the Nez Perce Reservation. Will we ever find them? I don't know. But this voyeur behavior is a cycle. It can be repeated unless, the perpetrator is arrested. And in this case, Bryan Kohberger was arrested. So let's talk about the attorney for the two families and the hearing that we had today. Let me pull that up. Let me take this down. This is interesting. Oh, I did want to show you the receipts on this too, of the Kaylee was being watched. This is People magazine saying this, that she was being watched, she was being stalked. So again, this would have been a way for him to have power over her, dominance over her, to follow her, to scare her, would have made him feel powerful. And this would have been enough, but then it wouldn't have been enough. It would have been enough until it wasn't, and then he would have needed to escalate.
That Ms. Laramie.
Okay, so this is the hearing that we had today. And we're not going to watch the whole thing. We'll watch a little bit of it. But the Leander James, who you see here, this is the attorney for Ethan Chapin and Madison's mom, Karen Laramie. The Laramies and her stepfather and the Chapins just all filed the suit. This guy is representing the city, and she is also representing the city of Moscow. And then this is the judge on this. So we're just going to briefly do the very beginning, and then we're going to go to the end, and I'm just going to give you the summary.
That of Ms. Stacy Chapin, that of Maisie Chapin, that of James Chapin. And then also the city had filed a declaration of Lori Hopkins. And so the court will be considering all of those as evidence in the matter, leaving though open for argument per the stipulation as to whether or not there are any kind of relevancy objections or any other objections to those declarations that need to be made by the parties here today.
So basically what the brouhaha is that, Ethan Chapin and the Laramies, I think, they agreed to this plea deal thinking that this was, done and over. They didn't realize that they were going to have to keep going back to court to fight to not have pictures of their loved ones be splashed all over the tabloids and splashed all over social media. So the city of Moscow is defending this. They, are trying to follow, they say, Idaho law. The judge didn't rule on this, but we're going to listen to what Leander James, who's the attorney representing the Laramies and the Chapins, and then we're going to listen to Andrew Buskell a little bit too.
Dried blood, smeared blood. Blood is part of the body. It is factually inaccurate to say that the bodies were entirely blurred. The blood, of course, most of it we see in what we call in the law the death scene images. Here are the bedrooms. There are also images of blood, that splattered blood and other blood. It looks like in images I reviewed, the representative sample, there was splattered blood outside of the bedrooms. What has been sent out, unfortunately, has been sent out, but any further dissemination of information should include complete redaction of all the blood. That's part of the body. Second point I wish to emphasize is that blurring is not redacting. Your Honor has in the record, for example, in the testimony of Stacy Chapin, how incredibly harmful and emotionally damaging it is for her to see images of her son and the other murder victims that are in these images that were released and that may be released. They're in there. They're just blurred. They're just harder to see. The city could have used a black box. They could have truly redacted. But the definition of redaction, which I put in the brief, is that all of the sensitive material is taken completely out. It's not that it's blurred. So we would ask that as part of the order that the city be required to, with any further dissemination, the portions that are redacted are completely blocked out and not simply blurred.
And so he makes a really good point. And one of the points he makes is that some of it was released with completely blacked out areas. And if the city of Moscow didn't think that that was okay, why did they release it that way? And the city of Moscow's response to that was, and that was Andrew Pascal, who responded to that, said that, well, we knew these lawsuits were coming, so we blacked it out ahead of time. And I'm like, maybe there is a part that they know that releasing this is just, there's not the public's right to know. And the other argument that Andrew Pascal made was that family members shouldn't have the right to do this motion that they were not really the victims. And the judge kind of clapped back at him for that and said, well, how are the victims? And she said, I want to make a differential between the victims and the people who are deceased. So how are the deceased? How are they supposed to fight this since they're no longer living? And he looked kind of surprised at her question. I thought it was very, very thoughtful. So I'm going to just skip around. But I'll just give you a sense of Andrew.
And the other section that applies, or at least has plausible application, is the provision that talks specifically about unwarranted invasions as weighed. It imposes a balancing test. I don't know how you can read Idaho Code 74-101 sub 17 and not come to the conclusion that you can find a privacy interest. You can find whether it inures to the benefit of the deceased, the victims themselves, the family members, whether they are victims themselves as a matter of other statutory provisions or not. It's still a balancing test. Whoever, whether it's the city or a court that is brought into the mix, has to weigh the competing interests. And the competing interests are the interests in privacy, which, whether you find that the family members that have brought suit here have an interest in privacy or not, it still has to be weighed against the interest in public disclosure. And so
I love the judge's face on that. She's just like,
also set forth in my brief, the city has received numerous requests for these materials. The city has received almost more than 1,150 total, and 250 of them specifically asked for images, body cam video, whatever. I may have the numbers slightly wrong there, but the bottom line is the city has received.
I would love to know how slightly wrong that number was. I just would like to know.
At minimum, a couple hundred requests.
A couple hundred is different than 1,100, y'all.
Investigatory records that include photographs, videos, whatever else the city's officers collected when they responded to this crime and investigated. Whether I personally, whether anyone personally thinks these images should be released or not, the city has a duty under the statute to release them on request, unless an exception applies. And as even Mr. James acknowledged, the city doesn't get to ask why. The city doesn't get to look into, quiz the requesting parties on why they want these images. And for lack of a better word, I struggle to understand why members of the public want these images, but I'm not the one who's made these requests. And equally, I unfortunately know that we live in a time when conspiracy theories, and as Mr. James referenced, the world of true crime, it's a big business, it's a big industry. Conspiracy theories run rampant, and as I cited in our brief, there are a small but vocal segment of individuals who, even after Mr. Kohberger pled guilty, admitted his guilt, admitted responsibility for these horrific acts, they still think that he might be innocent. I don't know what there is to say other than the reasons why any individuals would want these images. It's difficult for me to wrap my head around, but that is, unfortunately, under the way this statute is provided and written, that isn't the question. The question is whether the public has a right to look at the affairs of the public officials that run the government, investigate crimes, and prosecute crimes. There is no investigation ongoing. The city can no longer say, look, we can't release these. There's an investigation ongoing. It will impede the administration of justice. For good or for ill, the materials have to come out unless an exception applies. And the only exception that applies here is one that requires a balancing test. And as far as I can tell, the city applied that balancing test to these images and crafted what I think is the only sensible balance. The materials that the city has provided to the court, the initial redactions, Mr. James characterizes blurring of images as not redactions. I don't know how exactly to respond to that. If they're not visible because they're blurred, or if they're not visible because there's a black block over them, if you can still see the rest of the room, that seems like a fairly trivial distinction. If the court intends to issue an order that requires that black boxes be imposed instead of blurred images. Ms. Batista can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that the city would be probably amenable to that. I don't think that that is a hugely burdensome issue.
Miss Batista isn't saying anything. She is smart. She's staying quiet.
Whether other parties that have requested the images would object, I don't know. The city could end up back in front of Your Honor or in front of some other judge in this district saying the flip side of this argument, which is to say, well, blurring is good enough. Why didn't we get the blurred images? Why do we have to look at black boxes or something similar? As I said, the city is in the middle here. The city is going to get it from either side, and there doesn't seem to be any way to avoid that. As far as Mr. James' suggestion that images depicting blood spatters or blood pools are body parts, I don't know. I don't have a particularly, I don't know how to respond to that, simply put. If I'm cut and blood ends up on the floor, I don't think that is part of my body anymore. I know that there is a fairly extensive body of intellectual property law that gets into residual interests that individuals have in, for example, blood or DNA once it's removed from them. But to say that images of blood spatter is tantamount to and no different from a depiction of a dead body on the ground.
If it was your loved one or you, would you want them, dividing it that way? Well, it's out of your body now, so it's not, doesn't matter. So that gives you a little bit of a flavor for him, but let's go toward the end because they both, make their arguments. The city of Moscow saying they're in the middle. Mia Batista doesn't say anything. She's says very little. I'll put it that way. She says a little bit, but very little. She's smart. She's not gonna jump into this.
Why? This doesn't just apply to images. There could be a person who's in the image that is not the decedent, and it's like the example I gave of the naked girl. It's an unwarranted invasion into their privacy, and this is the mechanism for them to assert it is it's an unwarranted invasion.
So what his analogy was is if the body camera comes into a house from a break-in attempt or anything, and somebody is accidentally in the shower and doesn't have something on, and the body camera picks that up, do they have a right to put that image out of that person taking a shower? Common decency would say no.
The person identified, and it could be a person who's not the person the picture was taken of, whose privacy interests are being violated. Is my point. And probably the girl example isn't the best, but there are situations where there could be information that's disclosed that shows one person, but it violates the privacy rights of another. Maybe the wife or husband. A disclosure of certain images or information about their spouse may be an invasion of their privacy too, and they have a right to assert it. So I think the court can interpret that statute to apply where the privacy interests of the person identified or the people identified or the people bringing the claim here. And also, I just remind us not to forget that there's a common law right of privacy out there, which standing alone, I think, is a basis to grant the injunction. So thank you, Your Honor. In sum, I think the city's actions already answered the central question here. There is a privacy interest. There is an unwarranted invasion. The real question gets to be this balancing test then. And I think that's where Mr. Pascal was going when he said several times, in end of the day, you really get to this balancing test. And I'll just say a few words on that. There's a balancing test, and we recognize the importance of transparency in government, and we recognize the importance of the policies underlying the statute regarding disclosure of information that's not subject to the exceptions, and we understand that. I will contend this is a unique case with the worldwide attention, and because we're at an inflection point in technology and an inflection point in this true crime phenomena, that has all collided to make this, I think, a unique case. And how that fits into the analysis, I think, is something for the court to consider. But when you look at what these images would show, the dead bodies, I mean, what more do we need to know? The autopsy reports, for whatever reason, are already out there. If you want to know how many times each child was stabbed, just go read the autopsy reports. They're circulating everywhere. If you want to know how gory the scene was, you can read all that. I think that was partly what the court was looking at. And so the questioning is, this information is already available out there. Do we really need to put gory images of bodies and blood, which is part of the body, no matter how that's argued, it's part of the body, to put it out there in the world? Under the unique circumstances of this case, no, because there's already so much information out there. You can find this stuff elsewhere without having to look at these images. So in conclusion, Your Honor, I think the city has already admitted that the statutory unwarranted invasion of personal privacy interests apply, because they've already interpreted the statute to redact images before any of this got started. And the question then gets to be, where's the line for the court? And I think the court has already found that the testing images are over the line. We think some audio and some other images are over the line. And we respectfully ask the court to enter the permanent injunction. Thank you.
And I thought the argument of the blood, well, it's out of your body. These people weren't donating blood. This wasn't them at a, donating, and now it's been taken. This was horrific and horrifying. So I don't know. I thought that was kind of weird. Let me know if you have a different take on it. But I thought it was not a good. I didn't think that was a good argument.
All right, thank you, Mr. James. All right, thank you, counsel, for your submissions, including the briefing on this. I am going to take the matter under advisement and issue a decision. In the meantime, the temporary order that is in place specifically was in place until an extension is granted or the order is vacated upon further hearing. The temporary order will remain in place pending the court's decision. I am going to issue an amended temporary restraining order, however, because the original order did just prohibit disclosing any images, audio, or video depicting inside of Madison Bogan's bedroom. Given the additional plaintiffs in the matter and the city's agreement at this point in time, based upon the argument presented in answer to the court's question, that if the court does find there's a privacy interest, ultimately for these families, that privacy interest would extend to the other, at least to see.
So what she's saying is that she's going to extend this restraining order to include not just images of Maddie and not just images of Ethan, but she's going to extend this to Kaylee and, and also to Xana.
Victims' families without filing a suit in the matter. I'm going to just extend the temporary restraining order to include that there wouldn't be any disclosure of images, audio, or video depicting inside of Madison Bogan's bedroom, I am going to say at this point in time, of the Madison Bogan's bedroom, Kaylee Gonzalez's bedroom, which was also black boxed at one point in time, and then Xana Kernodle's bedroom, in which Mr. Ethan Chapin was located. At this point in time, just so that there aren't any additional release with those things until we can get at least a final decision here. Quite frankly, I think the court has made clear in its temporary order decision that was issued on August 15th that I think we are really looking at the death scene images, whether or not those should be released, and if so, to the extent of which, whether they're blurred or otherwise redacted, what that is going to look like, so as not to cross the threshold of the unwarranted invasion that's being asserted.
So good for the judge on this. I really appreciate her standing up for the victims and their families. Of course, the victims can't come in and ask for this not to be shown. They're not, the ones who have passed away are no longer with us. So for that argument to be made by the city of Moscow, I don't know, it was kind of gross. But I noticed that Ms. Batista, who's Moscow city attorney, she was very smart. She stayed silent and kept herself out of the fray. And it seems like Andrew Puskal, who's only doing his job, so please don't send any negativity to anybody, but he took most of the hits on this. But some of his arguments, kind of deserved it.
But again, I thank counsel for your time here this morning, as well as your briefing on the issue and the declarations. I will take the matter under advisement, and we will be in recess for today. Anything further, Mr. James, in this matter?
No, on behalf of my clients, we thank the court for the judicial guidance the court has provided and the riveted attention the court has given to this case and the expedited nature of the case. And we are grateful that the court, however it comes out, we are grateful for the court's judicial guidance.
All right, you're welcome. Thank you, Mr. James. And Mr. Puskal, anything else on behalf of the city here today?
I would just like to thank you as well for your time and your attention to this matter, Your Honor. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. We will be in recess.
And she didn't say anything to Ms. Batista because Ms. Batista was very, very quiet. She didn't say a lot. She was definitely not going to put herself in the middle of all this. Let me see if I could make myself. Okay, she didn't say anything because Miss Batista was smart, and the other guy kept trying to get her, the Andrew Polskal kept trying to get her to interject, and she was like, she said like one sentence during the whole entire thing, and kudos to the judge. She did, it have this temporary restraining order. She did keep it in place and blackout, because some of the arguments, and I'm just really, and I understand the city of Moscow is probably just following the law in Idaho, and maybe the law has not caught up to today, where we have this case, and we have, true crime is, huge, not just here on YouTube, but throughout the world. It's being covered by the mainstream media, just probably more heavily than we've seen, and the idea of putting this out is just really awful. I just can't imagine why anybody would put this out. Please watch your words, you guys. Please don't put anything in the chat that's like, I can't share. Okay. Don't put me in the position of having to delete your comment just because it's, too graphic. Just please keep it classy. Watch your words. Think about the words I use and the words I don't use, and try to stick with those. G says, do you think BK already saw those images? I mean, he would definitely be able to access them. He had a tablet in jail, but they have been, what has been put out so far has been, somewhat redacted. But would he? Sure. Why, he could relive it over and over. Just imagine the implications of having him be able to just relive this over and over by having these images. Truth says, if the count adds up to 101, considering he wanted to be a professor. Zeus says, I don't agree with the families about them suing. They're upset over the plea deal. No, this is the families that agreed with the plea deal. So I understand. But this is the Laramies. This is the Chapins and the Laramies. These are the ones who agreed to the plea deal, who were on board with the plea deal. This is not the Kernodals and the Gonzalveses that are the ones that filed this lawsuit. So I'm going to just respectfully disagree that this is not being coming from family members who are, just upset at Bill Thompson. These are family members who are upset because they don't want their loved ones' images. Just like in the Gannon Stock case, remember all the blowback that Zav girl got when she posted Gannon Stock's images behind a paywall on Patreon, right? People thought it was, not right. It just wasn't the right thing to do. And, she agreed. She's apologized. But, these family members, this are the Chapins and Karen Laramie. So that's Maddie's family. They're the families that are objecting to this. And I don't think they would have agreed to this plea deal if they would have thought for a minute that they were going to have to have ongoing litigation to keep the images of their loved ones. They probably agreed to the plea deal to keep those images from being circulated, because once they were presented in court, they would have been out there and it would be almost impossible to pull them back. So probably part of the reason that they were all in on the plea deal would have been to spare themselves from standing in line at the grocery store and then walking by a magazine or a newspaper and seeing their loved one, splashed out on, for everybody to gawk at and to see. At what point is it, people's right to know versus just common decency? Where are you guys at? If you think that these images should be released but redacted with the black boxes, put a 1 in the chat. If you think that these images should be released with no redactions at all, put a 2 in the chat. Let's just see where you guys are at on this, because maybe I'm out here by myself thinking I don't think it's a, it's the right thing, because yeah, the family and their friends and the victims aren't here. Kaylee and Maddie and Ethan and Xana can't file a lawsuit. They can't do anything to try to say what they want. They're not here. So thank you for your great comment, Zeus. Thank you for modding today, Kathleen. Thank you for modding as our head mod, and Jazz. She says, please share, like, subscribe. It's free. It lets YouTube know. Liking, sharing, and subscribing, those are all free things. And it lets YouTube know that I am doing a responsible job covering this case, that I'm not, I'm not being irresponsible. I'm not giving you guys nonsense. Girl Friday said, if all the people shouldn't have access to any of it, I wish he could have had that blocked on his iPad. Yeah, it is wild. If you're giving a thumbs up, let me know what number thumbs up you are. Thank you for the thumbs up, Justice Jane. Delana said that was terrible. Like, yeah, Gannon stock. Yeah, but it would be, I think it's, it's just a line of common decency. Thank you, Dabs. It's a line of common decency of, it's not just, do we want this rule only in place for minors? Or is this just should this be common decency? Like, at what point is the public's right to know versus, too much? And the family's right to protect themselves from having to see these images. Yeah, I agree, Girl Friday. It's tacky. Hound Lover says, as much as I support the victim families, I don't believe the photos will be suppressed. I think the horse is out of the barn. I empathize with them, and that's where I stand. Thank you for sharing your thoughts on this. Truth says, it's out of the barn with no halter. Yep, you're right. Thank you for letting me know where you guys are at on this. We can see a lot of ones. Lisa says, I can see it from the family's perspective. So thank you so much. Dab says no. So 1, okay. Juju Bean says, I know another creator that released photos behind a paywall. I don't know. Are you talking about the Gannon stock case? Hey, Jennifer. Hey, Mike. I hope the picture is heavily redacted. That's what the families want. They don't want blurred. They want it, withdrawn, not done. Just don't put it out there like that. And they also don't want their loved ones, blood spatter being shown. Crafty One said, personally, these should not have been made public. I don't think any other photos should be published. Well, the judge is keeping the restraining order from having those out there in place while and I think what she needs to do is what she's going to go do. This is just my opinion. Let me know if you have a different one. I think what the judge is doing is she's going back to see if she has enough case law to support not releasing these. The problem is that the law has not kept up with the times. When we haven't had a case like this in a while, that's been like this horrific and graphic. So I just feel like the law hasn't caught up with it. Oh, thank you. Yes, I did. For those of you that are just weren't here, I wasn't feeling very well during the last live stream I did. For those of you that don't know what happened, thank you for your congratulations on our 50K. We should definitely celebrate that. For those of you that don't know, I fell a couple of weeks ago. I did get it checked out. I got checked for a head injury too. And I'm like off my crutches. But when I'm sitting trying to stream, I have to sit, for hours to get ready. And I was trying to sit in my last live stream. If you watch, you'll see I'm listing. That's because I had my foot elevated. So you could see me like kind of listing, kind of looking tired in the last couple of live streams. It's just because I wasn't feeling very well. And also was trying to keep my foot elevated, which just, took me out of the picture frame. I didn't realize it until I went back to rewatch it. A lot of what I filmed looked like this instead of like this. Girlfriend said, yeah, I forgot he should not be allowed to have access to that. Thank you for modding today, Mike. Juju says, no one has the right to see these photos except for the victims' families. BK doesn't ever need to see them again. Jennifer said, the hearing certainly didn't seem to end. Yeah, I mean, I think that she's like taking it under advisement, which means she has to find case law to either support or not support whatever decision she's going to make. But I think ultimately she's going to follow the law because she doesn't want to be overturned on appeal. Lisa thinks they should be suppressed. DR says 1. Hound Lover says, I see it from both sides. Maybe it's time for Idaho to develop some new laws regarding crime. Yeah, think about if you were, imagine that the law enforcement came into your house and maybe it had to do with some kind of a ruckus downstairs. Maybe you have roommates and it doesn't have anything to do with you. And you just happen to be in the shower and they were clearing the house and they picked you up on the body cam. Should that image of you in the shower be released out to the public? It's part of the body cam, or should it be redacted? And so, that's, this is worse than that. But I guess that's a nicer way of saying it. Hey, Jojo. Lotus said, no one needs to see those pictures. Lisa said, I wish BK could not see any media with him. He enjoyed. Yeah, he would just relive it through those photos. Thank you so much for modding today, NJust. DR said, I can't imagine anyone going with this if it was their child. Yeah, and I think the families agreed to the plea deal. I would think that, and the Laramies and the Chapins were both behind this plea deal. But I think part of why they probably supported the plea deal was they never dreamed in their wildest dreams that they would have to go back to court to fight to not have their loved ones, images splashed all over for other people's entertainment. At what point is it covering the news, and at what point is it just, like, I know when there's like a car crash, we all stop and look. That's human nature, right? But at what point is it just covering the news, and at what point is it just looky-loo? Does it have any real value? And it is something that we're going to have to decide as a true crime community. I decided it for my channel. I told you guys weeks ago I was not going to be sharing the images, and the body camera footage that I did show you was not blurred out. It had the black boxes, and that's intentionally why I showed it. It was not blurred. I wanted something that was completely blacked out because I didn't think we needed to see those. We didn't need to see that. Juju said, not sure why. That's the Gannon stock case. Yeah. And that was kind of a thing too, where it's like, the true crime creator who shared it doesn't even curse on her channel. I really don't believe she realized what a bad look it was for her channel. I honestly don't think she would have done that. She doesn't even swear on her channel. If she would have known that, that, and I don't think she, but she put it behind a paywall on Patreon and she got excoriated for that. So my question is, what's the difference here? What's the difference here? Where are we going to, as the true crime community, what are we going to decide as a community? Diane said, if the 911 call would have been sooner, I think there would not be interest. I don't know. I don't think that, Steve has told us that he doesn't think that even if they had called sooner, it would not have saved Kaylee. Pamela, thank you so much for being a Reporter Room channel member for a month. And thank you to NJaz, who gifted a Reporter Room membership. If you got the Reporter Room membership, please make sure you say thank you to NJaz. And NJaz gifted, oh my gosh, 5 Reporter Room memberships. Wow, you guys, if NJaz gifted you a Reporter Room membership, please make sure you say thank you. Thank you for modding today, Mike and Dabs. Mike says, it won't matter what transparency there is. There's going to be people making up nonsense with the conspiracy. Well, we've already seen that. A lot of you guys said, well, now that he's pled guilty, what's going to happen? And I told you guys at the time, the ones who have ethics and integrity will accept his guilty plea and move forward. The ones who don't will keep spinning and ginning it up, conspiracy nonsense, because that's how they're making their money. And as long as they get clicks and views, they won't care. Hey, ASP Lizzie. Loaded Hot said, there are some people online thinking he's going to trial. Yeah. Well, maybe some people didn't know that he pled guilty. I've had people come in and argue that he hasn't pled guilty and that he didn't confess. I'm like, he signed a confession. He signed a confession. He didn't allocute, but he did sign a confession. Kathy said, everyone needs to think about it. If that was my family, I would feel about everyone seeing those images. Right. or you, right? Or you. Jet says one. Jennifer said the dilemma before the judge right now is that the pictures have already been released to the media inside of the bedrooms, and Ethan doesn't really have legal standing for Xana's room since he's not the tenant. Well, the point that the judge made, and you know, you're not wrong, and the attorney for the city was, you know, making an argument that that Ethan, you know, wouldn't have, not just Ethan wouldn't have standing, but that the victims would have, if the family members didn't have standing. It was just the people who were the victims that were deceased. And the judge made sure to say not all the victims are deceased. And she's including Dylan and Bethany as victims of the crime. But, you know, what the judge was saying is that none of these victims that are deceased can file a motion with the court to advocate on behalf of themselves. So what are the family members supposed to do? Not advocate for their children? I mean, if it was your child, what would you do? What would you want? Space Junkie says, does BK have those photos at his disposal, or does, I don't know. That's a great question. I don't know. Linda said no release of, Linda doesn't want them released. Dabs is saying, please hit the thumbs up and subscribe. It's free. And it's sensationalism. You know, at what point we have to find a balance between reporting out the news and just putting out information, because the attorney's right. We can find out all of the details from reading the documents. Do we have to see them all to know them all? You know, do we want to have the next couple of years with people looking at, you know, pictures of blood spatter, you know, armchair detectives deciding on, you know, what it shows? I don't know. We're at a crossroads, you guys. I mean, they didn't show pictures of, in the Chris Watts case, they didn't show pictures of Bella and Cece in the oil tanks. They kept those away. So I think there is like common decency. I think we can all agree. There's no value. No. Elsa says, I'm looking for someone looking into the, if you want to send me a link on Twitter, I'm at Davies Writer. Linda says, is 214 appealing? Is BK appealing? I'm sure he gets like a, he can appeal. He agreed not to appeal. So what will happen is the prosecutor will run in and say he agreed not to appeal, and the judge can either hear it or not hear it. I don't think they're going to hear it. Redacted is standard. I think, you know, in cases like this, I just think we have to agree as a true crime community that maybe their common decency should prevail. Just like in the Gannon Stock case, it wasn't that it wasn't out there and that there wasn't other people that had, it was just common decency not to do it, you know? And I don't want to say anything bad about the content creator who did that, but it was a bad decision, in my opinion, to share those. Thank you to our producers, and thank you to our channel members. Oh, I have a clap button too. So much for that, for being channel members. If you would like to have your name appear like this, this is not free. This costs, I think, $2.99. So it's not expensive. And you get a check mark next to your name, and your name appears just like this in all of my live streams and videos. So if you would like to become a channel member, we're also coming into the holidays where we do have a lot of family things coming up. And it is nice. We are a nice true crime family here on Reporter Room. A lot of kind and caring people. So if you would like to join us and become part of the group, let me know. I would love to have you. And I also want to do super thanks and coffee gratitude to Michael and Njaz and Barb and Tammy, and gifted channel memberships to Njaz and Njaz, because she gifted multiple channel memberships during the last live stream. All right, guys, let's see if we have any more comments that we want to go through. Let me put the banner back up. Most of these pro channels make money. Yeah, they do. They get more views than I get. It's true. But I have to be able to sleep at night and live with myself. Deb says, I hate that BK is getting all this attention. Yeah, I agree, Girl Friday. AMSMR says, I never heard him say he's innocent or that he didn't do it. That's right. He didn't plead not guilty. I think he wanted to have it both ways. I think he wanted to get off for doing this. And then he also wanted to take credit, right? Get off and take credit. Thank you, Pam, so much for the $4.99 super sticker. That is so kind of you. Thank you so much, Pam. Let me see if I can get this applause thing to go. All right, I copied that from another content creator. That's from Clutch Them Pearls, but I do think it's a nice thing to do. So maybe we will incorporate that. Space Junkie says, though of him, the thought, I think it's the thought of him being able to linger over those photos just really eats at my soul. Kathleen says, put your DNA on the like button. Girl Friday said, I read somewhere that he has his case file, including those images. I don't know if it's true, though. I don't know. This is my handle on X. If you're looking for me, if you want to DM me with a tip or something like that, you can always do it on X. That's another monster. Yeah. Lisa said, if I get done away with, I don't want anyone looking at my court. Yeah, I don't want anybody looking at that either. Jennifer said, typically from what I have seen, most inmates can have their motion of discovery through the end of trial. Yeah, Travis Alexander's images did get splashed. They are everywhere. But should they have been? And we weren't, as the true crime community wasn't what it is today. I mean, it's a juggernaut now. But yeah, he did. You're right. Dab said, I feel bad for the police that had to see it. Yeah, the police, I mean, when I played you guys just that little snippet and that had blacked out the rooms, which is why I chose that, you could hear how upset the police officer was. He was sighing. You could hear him trying to calm himself. Yeah, we do have really nice mods. It's called Mods Are Us. Teresa said, something is wrong with him. He doesn't look like other people. He doesn't feel like other people. Well, it's, people are wondering, is this nature or nurture? Thanks, Holly. I think it is maybe both, but I'm not really sure. I think that, there had to have been, this is all a game to him. Yeah. This is just my opinion. I feel like there was some enabling. Let me know if you have a different opinion on Brian Kohberger. I think he was the youngest. He was their first boy, their only boy. I wonder what he saw growing up in the house. I mean, both of his sisters went into the mental health field, right? One's a mental health professional. The other's a psychologist. So what was going on in the house? Why did he turn into this like misogynistic person that needed to dominate and control women? But he had this enmeshment with Marianne, right? Where when Marianne would try to like not pick up his calls, maybe she's trying to set some boundaries, maybe she's busy doing something else, he would start texting his father and pestering his father. Why won't mother answer? I mean, it was just kind of weird and creepy. He's weird and creepy. Was he born this way? Was it nature or nurture? You guys tell me what you think. I think it's probably both. I think it is nature where they are born this way. You could see him in high school trying to figure out, and the Tapatalk visual snow thing, why he viewed other people. He knew his father was a good man, but he didn't feel anything for him. You could see him trying to figure out himself. Betsy said, he said, I'm looking forward to being exonerated, not innocent. Right. You're right. Good point, Betsy. Holly said, listen to the YouTube. I don't usually comment on true crime channels, so I have to get used to the proper words. Oh, yeah. Loaded said, I really don't think he makes it a year. Oh, well, you're not alone. A lot of people don't think he's going to make it a whole lifetime behind bars. He's a big target. Jojo said, sorry, I just got a phone call. I'm glad you're here. Jess said, wow, thank you so much for my gifted channel membership. And Jazz, you are the best. I really appreciate and thankful. So says thank you to you and Jazz. Let's give that a clap. I want to use my phone. I like that. So that was a feature that this platform just added. Dabs thinks his mom pampered him. Lisa said, yeah, one police officer stopped and propped himself up before going back in and checking the house. Yeah, I think that it had to have been horrific. And once you see the photos, you can't unsee them. So should family members be subjected to them? Like I said, I think he was always weird. Mother made excuses for him. Pam agrees. And just said he was only 22. I feel so bad for him. I'm not sure. I think this is a site. I don't think this is about BK because BK was 28 when he was arrested. Both. Lisa said, I wonder if the Kohberger parents ever set limits on Brian Kohberger. I don't know. I just wonder if there was like no boundaries. I mean, if I would have been the father, I would have been like, leave your mother alone. Right? If she doesn't want to answer her text messages right now, it's because maybe she's trying to watch a movie. Maybe she's trying to sleep. Maybe she just doesn't want to deal with him. But, apparently they didn't set any boundaries. And they enabled him and made excuses for him. His dad was, at the neighbors when they were, helping him move into his WSU Pullman, Washington apartment. He has a hard time making friends. Yeah. Because he's weird. But it was worse than that. He stole his sister's cell phone. So he stole from his own sister. Who does that? He had IDs belonging to 2 different people. He couldn't hold the job. He lied on his resume about the dates of his employment. Linda said, I suspect the father was an Archie Bunker type of guy. I have no idea. Girlfriend said, I'm thinking he was born that way. I mean, the father didn't even show up at the sentencing. So I think that's interesting. Kathleen said, calling his father to talk to mother is also controlling. Yeah. All right, guys. Well, I think I'm going to leave it there. Please consider subscribing. Thank you so much for coming by to spend a little bit of time with me. And I will be live streaming again on this case. And also, I just posted a video on the Emmanuel Harrow case, baby Emmanuel, with updates on that. If you haven't seen that, you'll want to watch that next. Please subscribe. It's free and it helps me out a lot. Thanks for watching.